just tune into gratitude. And then the first question that we like to ask all of our guests is just, is there anywhere or any person that you might like to acknowledge with gratitude who may have supported you or helped you on the path to doing what you're doing today?
Absolutely. There are so many people that I exist because of. My husband, who is this amazing cybersecurity data privacy attorney, has for years shared resources with me, paid for CLEs that I couldn't afford when I was scrapping in government jobs, made sure that I had access to a high quality tech and cybersecurity and AI education. My parents, who didn't have the opportunities for education that I had. I'm the first in my family to graduate college, much less law school. And on one side, I'm the first to graduate high school. They gave me a completely different life than what it was that they grew up with through their own sacrifice. And I really do exist because of those ancestors and family members who believed that a better life was possible. I exist because of other women. When I was working in an incredibly corporate big law environment and my psychedelics practice was starting to become a liability, and the firm was asking me to choose, women like Lauren Rudick, who started Rudick Law Group, where I now work, reached out to me and said, "What you're doing is important. And the fact that someone doesn't take it seriously is a problem. Not a problem with you, but a problem with their perception of what the world can be." I see some other people on this call who also deserve call outs. Women like Allison Hoots have been working in this field, in this industry, in this space for a really long time to make sure that female lawyers and other lawyers in general who step out to say that people in psychedelics deserve protecting, that they have legal frameworks to do that with. I do not exist in isolation. I don't think anyone in this field exists in isolation. And I am so, so thankful for the codependence that has resulted in my existence.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I love how you really relate it back to your family to start with, and what a different life that they've been able to give you, and how you are embracing that and using that to support and change so many other people's lives. So thank you so much for that. I think the other question is like, what actually drew you into being specifically interested in your corporate law practice to work with psychedelic companies?
So I have had a career I never could have planned. And I always say to young lawyers, don't try to plan out your whole career. The best things happen to you when you don't really know what's going to happen next. When I graduated law school, I started at a DA's office. I was a narcotics prosecutor and a major crimes prosecutor. I eventually rose to be the youngest chief that DA's office had ever had of a section. And I was really involved in running a grand jury that dealt with large-scale drug trafficking, gun trafficking, human trafficking, complex crimes like serial killers and gang-related crimes. I was highly, highly involved in attempting to be what I thought of as a progressive prosecutor, someone working inside these very conservative organizations who took both a long and short view of justice. I believed very much in trying to change policies because I want to live in a world without prosecutors and without jails and without prisons. But I also know that someone's on the docket tomorrow, right? And if the person across the aisle doesn't view that person as a human being who is fully capable of all of the things every other human being is capable of, then what does that mean for that person whose life is affected that day? For a long time, this was the right choice for me. It was where I needed to be. But we change and things change. And I was always constantly looking at myself through the lens of my faith. I practice Zen Buddhism, specifically Soto Zen. And this view of compassion is something that is active, something that you have to do every day, and something you have to measure yourself against every day. Really influenced my career. And I was exposed to a lot of violence. I saw a lot of things no human being should ever see. And at a certain point, I started to worry that my hopelessness and deeply, deeply rooted sadness in how drug policy was affecting America was affecting my ability to be compassionate. I was really starting to worry that my sadness with a broken system was making me less able to be heart open to every single person that I ran into, whether they were called a defendant or whether they were in a different role at that time. And so slowly I started to think about what it might look like to leave. Eventually, I wound up in big law. I ended up in a huge corporate firm, with offices in most of the 50 states with thousands of attorneys. And I was working on really high level healthcare and tech projects. I've always had a passion for tech. And after seeing so many people be prosecuted that I thought should have been patients, I really wanted to know, why is it in a rich country, in a place with so many brilliant people, we see so many people end up prosecuted, end up in these really deeply scary positions because of their role in small scale drugs, personal use, that kind of thing. Like, how is this happening? And I made it my mission to take this opportunity in Big Law and learn as much as I could about business, corporations, deal structuring, about healthcare and how money affects healthcare in the United States and in the rest of the world, and also about tech and AI governance and cybersecurity, and how all these things kind of overlap to create and in many ways feed the broken systems that we're a part of. I thought that I would do that forever. And then in February of 2020, very shortly before I think what was a large moment in many of our lives, I had the most important moment of my life. On February 16th, 2020, I fell approximately 35 feet while at the gym, and I completely changed the course of my life in the 2.5 seconds it took me to hit the ground. I injured my back and went from being this very able-bodied person who had always been an athlete and let sports and athletics define a lot of the way that I related to my body to someone with a disability that I would never fully recover from. Years later, I still live in chronic pain. I still walk with a slight limp that gets worse when the pain gets worse. I sometimes still use mobility devices. And I never have ever gotten back into the body that I was before those 2 seconds happened. This changed the course of everything for me. And it left me, in many ways, a shell of my former self. Um, I was someone who was really happy. I had a great husband and an awesome group of friends and a wonderful family and a job I was really passionate about. And all of a sudden, I couldn't move. And I remember I'd signed up for this yoga teacher training that I was really, really excited about. And then I realized I was going to have to do the first day of yoga teacher training in a wheelchair. And that moment of like showing up and showing yourself as somebody who's injured, and all of a sudden really learning what it means to be disabled in a society that thinks it's done everything for disabled people already, it it broke me. And I became really depressed. The constant pain that I was in was just eating part of my soul. And despite my years-long meditation practice and all of the support, I really struggled. A client reached out to me and she said, "You should do psychedelic assisted therapy." And I laughed at her and I was like, absolutely not. I have these like sterling law enforcement credentials. I'm this Buddhist who won't even touch alcohol. Like, why would I do psychedelics? And she said, "Oh, you will." And she hung up the phone and she called my priest. And my priest reached out to me and he asked me a question that has been, I think, formulaic to everything that I do in psychedelics. And he said, "Are psychedelics for connection or escapism? Are you reconnecting with your community? Are you getting high and running away from your problems? Do you really think that all these people in your life who love you are reaching out to you and asking you to do this because they want you to get high? Or do they want you back?" And it was so obvious, like they wanted me back. I had picked up all this extra stuff that was really hard to carry, and I had to put some of it down, and I needed help. I had my first psychedelic assisted therapy session, and immediately afterwards, I remember holding my practitioner's hands and saying, "You have to let me look at your insurance stack. This can never go away." I was receiving PAC care in the rural South of America, a place where even marijuana is incredibly controversial and people still get 15 and 20-year prison sentences in some cases. I was terrified that this was going to go away. And so my first integration session was me sitting there helping someone build an insurance plan to keep their business alive. From her, it spread out into a bunch of ketamine clinics. From there, people who were working with medicinal cannabis. From there, retreat centers and facilitators, and then people who were working in regulated psilocybin. Um, and all of a sudden, this became my whole life. And I had to choose my corporate work or this community I really believed could change the world. So I left Big Law. I ended up at Reddick Law Group with a bunch of other women who care a whole lot about these plants and fungi and what it is that you all on the call do in the world. And it has been a dream come true. It's what I was put on this earth to do. I'm sure of it. But it was a long and winding road to get there.
Oh, Victoria, I'm just actually just letting that settle in my heart. And yeah, I feel really emotional and teary, like for the things that you needed to go through to get here, but also the way that you've embraced it and the good that you're doing from the depths of your experience, from the depths of your heart. Like, who wouldn't want to work with you in psychedelics? Like, you get it. Ah, I can't believe how emotional that made me. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for sharing your story. Yeah. Whew. Okay, so just so a reminder to all of our live audience here at Psychedelic Revelations, the first half of this show, about for first 45 minutes or so, I get to pick Victoria's brain and have a little podcast style episode. But for the second half of this community conversation podcast, it's over to you. It's for your questions and your shares. So just letting you know that we will, open up the mic about halfway through the show for any of your questions. And also, if there's specific ones you would like to have asked, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat as well. So I'm going to start with like big picture, just like handing over to you, like what is going on? Like this, I mean, to me, it's definitely unprecedented that these shutdowns. Of course, we're probably unprecedented in how many psychedelic accounts there are as well. But what is triggering this shutdown?
So there are a couple of things that are happening. One thing that I learned from representing really large tech companies while I was in Big Law is that there's a real rush within these companies to push out tools. So whether it's an AI tool, whether it's an internal tool, whatever it is that might save the company a dollar, there's a real rush for engineers to perform in that way. And so a lot of AI screening tools get pushed out a lot more quickly than you would think that they would for a company whose reputation is based on technological sophistication. AI isn't magic, it's a word recognition tool for lack of a better term, and it's trying to predict what comes next, right? An AI model's success is largely based on its ability to logically predict the next thing that would come after a given word and to do that really quickly. So we've seen really recently a shift on all platforms, Meta included, to using AI to kind of give a rough scan of things and start grabbing problematic content. So that's happening on one end. On the second end, we also have seen a rise of advocates, consumer advocates, who are concerned about how social media is affecting certain populations, especially children. So there have been real litigation expenses that have been in the millions of dollars because of the content that's on some of these platforms. It used to be, especially in the United States, that if you were just hosting content and you didn't publish it, you weren't responsible for that content. We've seen a real shift away from that view of these platforms as simply platforms into being publishers. And a lot of that comes from the way that algorithms measure popularity and push certain content over others. So the litigation risk that comes from having controversial content, whether that controversial content is allowed or not, on your platform is financially much higher than it used to be, and is often financially way higher than the potential liability of accidentally removing something that's incorrect. So we have tools that aren't as sophisticated as you might think, mixing with a very unbalanced risk equation when the factor that you're concerned about is money. Then on top of that, we've seen some revisions to common community standards. Whether you're talking about meta platforms or other platforms out there, there have been additions to these community standards that include things like account integrity standards, where they're not just evaluating you based on the content you publish, but they're also evaluating you based on accounts that you're linked to, who follows you, who you follow. So if you're in a community like psychedelics or cannabis or functional mushrooms or mycology, where there are undoubtedly certain people in the community that are going to try to push the limits of what they can do on a platform, even if you're not, if 10 accounts that follow you also follow that problematic account, the odds that you get taken down go up. In the environment that we're in right now, if you plan on having even remotely controversial conversations on a public platform, you have to remember that even though these platforms make their money off off convincing you that you own this content and that this is your platform, it never is your platform. And they truly don't care about any individual account, no matter how much money you spend, how verified you are, or how successful you are. Ultimately, you have to build the responsibility of protecting yourself, your brand, and your business into your cost of doing business, and you have to be prepared to lose it at any moment.
Okay, that is a stark reality. Thank you for being so clear on that, that we need to understand that we do not own this content and that at any moment it can be just wiped away from us, which I have personally experienced, and it's painful, my friends.
It really is.
So yeah, yeah, I'm back. My business account wasn't affected. I know it could be at any time, particularly what you in conversations you and I have had is that if you have one account that gets deleted, very often within a short time frame, they're going to shut down the other one too. Is then that's a trend you've been seeing?
Yes. So once the new account integrity standards went up for meta platforms, a lot of what we saw is that people tend to access their social media on their phone. They're not like logging in and out on their computer or something like that. And when you have something on your phone, what's the easiest thing to do for logins? It's to link accounts so that you can get into everything and shuffle between them. When you have these linked accounts, what we know from the new account integrity standards is that having these things hooked together and losing one means that it is very likely that all accounts associated with what Meta has determined to be problematic content or violatory content, it's going to go down as well. I have had the experience personally of having a social media coordinator client, someone who managed like 50 social media accounts, all in the same niche. They were all in regulated cannabis in a certain area of the country. And she had a phone. And one of her accounts that she managed, another manager on the account, someone who owned the business, posted prohibited content. They posted content that appeared to sell cannabis on Meta, even though it was just an advertisement for an event that the dispensary was having. But, that clearly in that case, based on that content, violated Meta's community standards. That account got taken down. And then every other account she was logged into on her phone got taken down within 2 hours. So tons of businesses, all in the same area, lost their accounts basically immediately. We were able to get most of them back, but not all of them because they're tied so tightly together. And now I've had to tell her, as inconvenient as it is, you cannot link these accounts together. You can't use the same email for these accounts, and you have to log out and log back in. As inconvenient as it is, the closer these things are tied together, the more screening tools are going to see these accounts as you're trying to get around a suspension, you're trying to get around a ban, you're not following our community standards. These tools really aren't set up to understand the role of, say, a social media manager or consultant who may be logging into all of these accounts for completely legitimate reasons.
Oof. Okay. These are like not fun realities that you're sharing with us, but so critical, so important for us. So I just want to go back to your point number two about the changing integrity standards and how you were saying like just from accounts that you follow, you may be targeted. Did I get that right? Like just from
Mhm.
accounts that you follow, you may be affected.
Yes. So one thing that I think people are always surprised about is the level of visibility these platforms have into your activity. You can be banned for things you say in DMs. You can be banned for following a bunch of people who are using the platform to sell substances or who are posting inappropriate content. You can be banned for having a bunch of people follow you that end up getting banned because of inappropriate content. I myself have had several situations where people see psychedelics lawyer and they think criminal defense attorney. And so I will have people follow me who are clearly using the platform to sell substances. You know, they got the Telegram links and all of that stuff up. And those accounts don't last very long. They tend to get taken down pretty quickly. But if I didn't catch it and block that account when it followed me, I'll catch a 24-hour suspension or a 24-hour ban off of that. And so I monitor all of this stuff and I kind of use my Instagram as my own test case to say, okay, what are the things that are keeping me up for longer? And one habit that I've had to develop as my little bitty, 800 something follower account attracts some attention from the psychedelics community is that I've had to every 30 days literally put on like my calendar time to sit down and scroll through who is following me. And just if I see anything that's obviously problematic, choose whether that's something I want to engage with or not. I don't like having to devote that extra time to it. But as this has become more of a lifeline for me to my community, it matters to me. So I build that time in.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really practical advice. And I think most of us here on the call today, this is our business. This is our lifeline. These are the things we need to know. And I think these are the things that um we're just not aware of. Like I didn't know anything about these integrity standards and how they affected us and the community standards. Um, but I just thought it was words. I just thought it was trigger words that the AI bots were now just scanning. And now, because they can't really understand context, they just get glommed onto a word. And then also, kind of the word on the street is you can use the trigger words in the creatives as long as you don't use it in the copy. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, as someone who has read Meta's community standards, I think more times than the lawyers that wrote them, that is just a joke, but it feels like that at this point. Um, the standards are really nuanced and they really are set up to allow for conversation. If you look at the meta community standards, they start out with what is the purpose of having these community standards? And one of the first things it says is voice. We want to give people voice. And if you look at the standards specifically about psychedelics or about entheogenic compounds, or excuse me, entheogenic compounds, what you see is that they say you're allowed to talk about this stuff. But if you talk about it positively, you have to have your content restricted to people who are over the age of 18. And that if you are selling, attempting to sell, attempting to buy, buying, or asking for or trying to share these compounds, that that content's going to be removed, right? Um, so that seems pretty straightforward, and it seems to allow for a whole lot of conversation. The problem is lawyers who write really detailed, nuanced standards are not really replicatable in an AI tool. So if the AI tool is based on the idea that it's predictive, and how predictive it is the measure of how good it is. What you're going to see is that certain uses of certain words will cause an AI to predict that it's sales content or that you're asking for something more often than others. For example, let's say you're posting about this podcast and you're saying this podcast is going to be a webinar and it's available at this link. Well, what does sales content look like? Sales content tends to use the word psychedelic or the name of a drug or something like that. And then there tends to be a link to leave the platform to actually complete your purchase. So it's possible that an AI tool that sees content that mentions a word like psychedelic or psilocybin or something like that, and then sees a link or a QR code, is going to think that that's sales content. This gets to be incredibly problematic when people are selling educational content, right? When they say like, buy my course or, click here to purchase a ticket to this event. That kind of content tends to get flagged more quickly than other kinds of content that uses the keywords because a really good predictive AI is going to see that and be like, oh, that looks like you're selling something related to psychedelics or other compounds. Um, the uses of keywords are also problematic when we talk about images, right? A lot of people think an AI can't read an image. And depending on the tool, that is or is not true. Most AI tools that are out there right now can read text and images. And in fact, you can even hide text and images and take advantage of image scaling to prompt inject AI or use it for hacking purposes. So these are pretty good at reading things that are in images. So oftentimes what I will see is somebody post completely neutral copy that is like an allowed discussion, but their images will contain trigger words or, words that are related to psychedelics or cannabis or something like that. And then the AI will catch that even faster than they would have the content of a caption. Um, Really what we have to do when we think about how we talk on social media is think about how would something that's trying to predict what I'm going to say next read this? You are safer if you can edit your language a little bit. You are safer not using certain trigger words, but it's not going to be perfect, especially if the way that the content reads still looks like something that would be prohibited under that buy, sell, trade, ask for regulation. I also see a lot of people with business accounts not realize that their business account has an option for you to restrict how old someone has to be to follow you according to the birthday that they've put in on Instagram. So I see a lot of accounts where all of their content under the community standards is clearly allowed, but should be under the community standards age restricted. And they have this business account that allows them to age restrict it, but they haven't gone in and age restricted it. And so if the filter doesn't catch it and it ends up not being age restricted online, a lot of those accounts will get taken down. And it's so sad because you wish you could go back in time and tell someone, you have this option right here, just go click on it. Go click on it and save yourself the heartbreak.
Yeah, like as soon as I get off this call, I don't even know if mine is age restricted, but I'm gonna be doing that right away. And then like what would a business, a brand like mine, like Psychedelic Revelations podcast, we're promoting it all over the place, and it is click here to register. So
Hmm.
I sit in this uncomfortable always knowing like what almost like not what if, but like when is it gonna be flagged and shut down? So what kind of steps can we take in situations like that?
So I'm so glad that you asked that question because this is the reality for most people. The idea that you're going to be able to be perfect in public or on Instagram and completely reduce your possible liability or risk to zero is totally unrealistic for the average person. And so what ends up happening when the average person talks to a lawyer like me is that they start to get really scared because they know that they can't be perfect. When in reality, there's a lot that you can do to be better and be more prepared if something goes wrong. Obviously, I'm not your lawyer and this is not legal advice in this podcast, but there are general steps that the average person can take, and then you can get more specific by hiring a lawyer who specializes in this. General steps are to start with your website. Start with the home of you on the internet and look at what your content-based disclaimer says. Obviously, you should have standard terms and conditions, data use disclosures, all the stuff that every good website has. But you should also have a content-based disclaimer that explains what the purpose of your content is on the internet. Are you trying to offer harm reduction education? Are you trying to share scientific research? Are you trying to give people access to information that they might not otherwise be able to get? Lay that out. Start there and make it really, really clear what it is that you exist for on the internet. If that purpose is not to sell people drugs that's going to hurt them, that place is probably going to do a lot of help for you. Then I always tell people turn to your social media after you've gotten your home on the internet in order, right? And what we want to see as lawyers who work in social media is some consistency. Obviously, on Instagram, your page-long disclaimer is not going into the caption of everything you write. But there's probably a shorter form of that you might want to put one sentence in your bio, two sentences in a pinned comment on your post that just make it clear that there's this consistent purpose, right? So the website explains we're here for educational purposes. We're here to share this kind of information. And then you go over to Instagram and it still says this is educational content. We don't promote illegal activity. Then, once we go from there, we get to audio or video-based content. And when you're popping on a podcast or you're making a reel, there might be a sentence or two that you want to say that just reiterate that purpose. There might be a sentence or two you want to put in every graphic that you make that just reiterate that purpose so that when your account goes down, your lawyer, whoever you're using to reach out to Meta can say, look how consistent their purpose is across the internet. This person has put a lot of effort into making sure people engage with their content safely. They've gone above and beyond your community standards or your terms of use to make sure that it's clear that they are not another harmful person out to get people on the internet. From there, I also advise people to keep your photos somewhere that belongs to you, an external hard drive, a cloud-based service that you pay for, whatever it is. Make sure that you have that content cached somewhere if you want to keep it. I advise people to have a backup account that's totally separate from their original account, something with a different email, a different phone number tied to it. And if you're linking things to a Facebook page, we want a different Facebook page linked to that Instagram. We want these things to exist totally separately. And you should tell people that that backup account exists. Hey, in our newsletter, if you want to make sure to never miss our updates, we have this backup account. And if anything happens, you'll find us over there. Just be ready and start getting your audience used to the fact that you're ready for this already. Let people know how they can access you if something happens. I also tell people teach your audience how to do rage shake reporting. Rage shake is where you type in someone's account on Instagram and it says this isn't here. And you can shake your phone. I have a green screen up so you can't see what I'm doing, but you can shake your phone and then a little option to report something wrong will pop up on Instagram. And so you can tell people in your newsletter, if you ever don't see us on social media, shake your phone and report that something's wrong, report that something's missing. Um, Doing these things, having the backup account ready to go, having a clear purpose for your content on the internet that assures people that you're not there to cause harm, having a backup account that your audience is ready to pivot to should anything go wrong. None of it's going to be perfect, but all of it is going to keep you much safer on social media.
Yes, these are such practical steps that we can all take and really without too much effort either. I think step one is just being aware, which is what we're doing today. And actually was heartened that you even said yes to come on as a guest because I was like, okay, I must be doing something that's okay. So she's not afraid of coming on to get banned. So, yeah, those are super practical steps. Another kind of practical question I want to ask you is around, there's a lot of talk about, well, if you use a zero instead of an O in microdose, or if you put little funny symbols around or a dash in the middle, that the bots aren't going to catch it. And so people are playing around with this. What's the realities around that?
It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. Um, so my whole job is this, right? And as an attorney, I talk a lot on LinkedIn. That's where a lot of other attorneys and cyber professionals are. I sometimes have to edit cannabis and psychedelics. You may have even seen on Instagram when I posted about this, I covered up the word psychedelics and put sacred plants, on top of something. It works for me sometimes. It doesn't work for me other times. The thing about AI that I think anyone who's ever played around with ChatGPT knows is that it's inconsistent. If you ask it the same question twice and close out and then reopen it and ask it the same question again, you're going to get a slightly different answer. Um, this is good. This means the technology is working. It's becoming more dynamic and predictive. This is also bad because there's no set of rules that I can give you that are like, oh, if you spell psychedelics by replacing the vowels with, an asterisk, it's never going to catch it. That's not really how this works. This technology is not like a straight algorithm that you may have used in economics class in college, where you were learning to plug things into a formula and get a predictable result. It's much more dynamic than that. And so your results are always going to vary when you try to do something that quote unquote tricks the AI or tricks the bot. How lucky that you are on a given day is no predictor of future success, which is why I say right now, if I can leave you with any piece of advice on this call, once again, not legal advice, but as your friend, as somebody who cares about you, don't stress yourself out about it that much.
Mhm.
Get it in your head right now that this is not in your control and that unless you're doing something that's clearly against community standards, things that happen are probably not your fault. It's probably changes in the tool over time. Somebody tagging you in something inappropriate. Somebody tagging you in a comment on a post that the AI mistakenly reads as inappropriate. You have so much less control over this than you think that you do. And it's okay to be frustrated and upset and stressed about it, but it's not something you should blame yourself for. And
Right.
you really have to let go of the idea that there is some magic formula that someone's going to sell you or that you can hit on that's going to keep you safe in every circumstance.
Perfect. Excellent advice. Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is here's some practical steps you can take. Do the best you can. And the rest, we may be meeting here again. Victoria, I know I have to open this up to community conversation. I could keep going. I have so many more questions, but I'm going to try and slip in at least one, maybe two. The first one is, okay, immediately when my account was banned, all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, unsolicited WhatsApp messages from I don't know who knows a guy who knows a guy in Meta, and for $2,000 or $3,000, I can pay them and get my account back. And believe me, it was tempting, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, like what's going on with like what can people do and what red flags should people look out for?
sure. So when your account goes down, the very first thing that you should do is take a screenshot of the message that you got, click appeal, and then take a screenshot of the message that you get back. If you get emails, which, depending on how current the email address that you have tied to that account is, depends on whether you'll actually receive that message. Also save those. Make sure that you have them somewhere in case you need to go to somebody to try to get your account back. There are a ton of people who claim to be Meta employees or Meta contractors, people who can put in a Jira ticket to get a Meta engineer to look at this as fast as possible. Some of those people are legitimate. The vast majority of them are not. And you should be really skeptical of a couple of things. Number one, if somebody tells you that they can guarantee a result, in anything, in life, but especially in social media. Guarantees are not real. Anybody who's ever had a consult with me knows that I sit you down and I tell you, like, this is my current success rate based on the cases I've had in the past year, but this is no guarantee. And ultimately, these policies change internally and externally all the time. And there's a real limit to what I can guarantee you will happen. I can guarantee you will try. I can guarantee you will get in touch with these people. I cannot guarantee a result. So guaranteed results should make you really, really skeptical.
Mhm.
Guaranteed results for a very high price from someone that you don't know should also make you really skeptical. How does this person have your information? How did they get in touch with you? Are they willing to answer those questions? You know, a lot of the legitimate people will tell you, I get on Instagram and I monitor for accounts that go down, or, I hang out in groups for people where these accounts go down. So that's how I got your information. A lot of illegitimate people, once they message you and you ask, how did you get my information? All of a sudden you're blocked and they
Yeah.
won't speak with you anymore. Um, Anyone who's asking you for thousands of dollars should be able to explain what they're going to do with it. So if they can't tell you their process, if they can't tell you how it is that they're going to go about this, or if they won't, that's something to be skeptical about as well. As an attorney, I have an ethical obligation to do what's called earning a fee. I have to have an earned fee for the work that I do. So I can tell you, this is the steps that I'm going to take. This is how I calculate how much this is going to cost. And then these are the additional expenses that you'll have. Anyone who's not breaking those things down for you is somebody who should raise an eyebrow to. I understand why it's tempting, and I'm never going to tell anyone what they should or shouldn't do with their own money. But I am saying that anyone who's asking you for money should be able to tell you why and what they're going to do with it.
Thank you for that. Oh, yeah. I think another thing that I found so frustrating, Victoria, was in my case is like not getting the information from Meta. Like, I don't want this to happen again. Can you please tell me exactly what it was? I can't access that page anymore. I can't see what's there. Could I just, if you told me I could take it down, but there's just like this, no, you
Yeah.
are banned. Goodbye. Don't ask questions. You did something wrong. Figure it out.
Yeah. So, one of the most frustrating things for me as an attorney is I am constantly talking to people who are representing Meta. And I'm asking them, hey, my client plans on coming back to your platform. Can you tell me what the violation was so that we can make sure that they never do it again? They will absolutely not give you any information about their internal investigations. This comes back to what I said at the very top of this podcast. There is no level of care for any one individual account. No matter how popular you are, no matter how much money you spend, no matter what it's going on, they are not going to give you that information when something happens and when you lose your account. Now, there are some ways around this depending on where you live, right? If you live in certain states within the United States or certain places around the world, you have a data protection law. A good example of one is the CCPA in California or the GLPR in the European Union, where they require that a person be able to make a request for all of the data that a given data processor, a given company that holds your data has about them, and that they have a right to appeal a decision that is made based on that data. I've yet to find the plaintiff that was living in the right place and had the time and the funds to make a data controller complaint where we go to the right authority within the platform's company and make that data request and ask for everything under that statute. But it is always something I'm telling people. Social media is a microcosm of a much larger problem, and that is that data privacy and data security around the world are managed completely differently based on where you live. And you are subject to different rights and privileges and different responsibilities based solely on location, even if you're using the same platform as someone who lives 50 miles away from you across the state line. And so understanding your data privacy rights, understanding what you are entitled to by virtue of your citizenship in a certain area, state, country, province, whatever it is, gives you a little bit more of an idea of what you can do if traditional means like going through a lawyer to get your account back don't work.
All right. Well, let's transition over to we'll answer a couple questions in the chat. And before we do, one last question. Now, people who know this podcast know that our community has given us a tagline of "We go there" because we ask some questions that maybe other people aren't asking. And this one is just burning away here for me, particularly as I look at who's joining us live here, being majority of women. What I have heard, and what's been kind of whispered about is that these accounts are being targeted and shut down in a way that overemphasizes accounts owned or practiced by women or female practitioners. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. So I agree with that completely, but I don't agree that it is the result of nefariousness or targeting as much as it is the result of inefficiency and sexism in society. So, when we look at things like who takes responsibility in society for healing other people, who takes responsibility for helping, who is willing to create free, helpful content for someone just because they care that that person's healthy and okay, who is it that talks about harm reduction most of the time? We tend to view these things as feminine characteristics because we live in a patriarchal society. And so, because we tend to be the ones who are like, hey, I'm worried about you. Don't take this or don't just do this without this information. We tend to be the ones who put ourselves out there more and are therefore easier to target by a bot that is just trying to predict what it is that you say next. Someone who paywalls all of their content, never says anything for free, they're much harder to go after than someone who's out here doing real healing work. And that's terrifying. I will also say that I have seen the application of certain standards in a way that is clearly sexist. For example, I have seen someone who is just a beautiful woman, like no question about it, she's gorgeous, who is wearing completely normal outfits, like a t-shirt and tight jeans, be told that because she looks young and beautiful, that her content is child sexual abuse material. And I've never seen that happen to a man, you know? These bots are not perfect. And while I don't believe, based on what I've seen so far, that there is someone sitting at Meta being like, I hate women, and I'm going to do everything that I can to destroy their businesses. I do believe that the sexism that we experience in society and the patriarchal expectations that we experience in society are reflected in the AI that we create. This is the same reason why I have concerns about AI scanning job applications, because I'm concerned that the racism we experience in society is built into the AI that we create. I'm concerned that all of the problems that we have in society are built into the AI that we create. I am not this kind of AI optimist that believes that we can somehow make something that is completely devoid of the problems we have and the shortcomings that we experience.
Yes. Thank you so much for that perspective on that. It does, yeah, it does make it much more clear that this is a bigger, a bigger issue, a bigger problem than just, more accounts owned by women being shut down. There's so much systemic problem and societal problem underneath that. So, thank you so much, Victoria. Let's go over and see what our community's been asking. Let's start in the chat here. We had, where do we say? Jordan was asking, is it that we don't own the content and perhaps the platform does, or that we don't have a right, i.e., any guarantee that our content will persist on their platform online? Sounds like in any case, we should keep an at gold at copy of anything we post.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the interpretation of the answer to that question is going to depend a little bit on the forum in which you end up. So obviously, if you have trademarked or intellectual property protected content that you're publishing on one of these platforms, you still own that trademark, you still own that intellectual property right, whatever it is. However, when you post something on the internet, essentially what you're doing is creating a copy of it that is now hosted on a specific site, location, server, whatever it may be. And that copy is no longer owned by you because you don't have a right that that copy will stay where it is. That copy does not necessarily need to be trademarked or have other intellectual property protections around it for you to say that, like, this is mine. I took this photo. I own it, right? But when you create that copy that gets shown up on Instagram or on another platform, what you're doing is allowing that platform to host that content. And you have no right to the continued hosting of that content, kind of regardless of whether you interpret that as we don't own it or we don't have the right.
Clear. Thank you. Before we go to the next question in the chat, I just want to acknowledge with great gratitude my co-host, Wendy Schoaf, who has been taking care of a lot of the stuff in the background and our tech stuff so that I could lead this conversation with you. But I did also want to pass it over to Wendy to see if she has any questions or anything on her mind at this point as well.
Yeah, I want to say thank you because you actually give a lot of good actionable tips here, and I wrote them down. And I have a very specific question about when you were talking about the content-based disclaimer because I am in charge of our website. I actually build one of the side jobs I've had for years is building websites. So I'm kind of up to date on some of this stuff. But is it because I have this also in my other business where I'm in sexuality. So I'm talking about orgasms and any female pleasure, and it immediately gets banned. Um, so with that content based disclaimer, are you talking about like having a link like the same with your terms and conditions? Or are you like how what does that look like? And is that how does that impact it? Like if you can give me a little bit to
Yeah.
it, that'd be
No, people
great.
ask that question all the time, and I think it's a great one, right? Because there's like an ideal way of doing things, and then there's like a better than nothing way of doing things, and then there's a lot of things in between. Typically, what I like to see is that content-based disclaimers and terms and conditions have like a terms of use of the website landing page where a user can easily see all of the terms that they're subject to when they use a given website. And I like to see a link to that page in the footer of every page on the website, or at least the main landing pages. So if, for example, you have like a community page and an about me page and like a page where you sell merch, all of those major landing pages would have a link to this terms and conditions landing page, even if every product listing for t-shirts didn't have a link to that. However, better than nothing is always better than nothing, right? So, a lot of people who are building their websites and are figuring out platforms like Wix or Squarespace or something are not going to be at a level of sophistication where they know how to link every single landing page to a specific footer that's identical every time. I tell those people on your homepage, there should be a clearly labeled link to terms and conditions for use of the website, and that page should link to a landing page that has your terms of use, any legal disclaimers that you need to have based on where you're located and who you're targeting. That's usually a cookies policy. And then at the bottom of that would be your link to your content-based disclaimer. And your content-based disclaimer really does need to be something that's not like a form you pull off online. Someone should go through your content and they should talk to you and figure out what your purpose of offering this content is and be incredibly clear about that.
Okay. Do you mind me asking one more question on this?
Sure, go for it.
Um, uh, so on my sex blog, because I have a blog over there, it's called Owning Your Own, just for so I can say that so you know what I'm talking about. So on Owning Your Own, on any blog post where I talk about sex or sexuality or psychedelics, especially with the psychedelics, I have like a little kind of like sidebar disclaimer that says this is for educational harm reduction. Like it basically runs through this is not to be taken as legal advice or all of all the things. Do you think having that, on any of these pages, just even like a little box, because not everyone's going to click on the disclaimers. And when we're talking about social media here, like are they going through all of the pages on their website, or are they only just going to your landing pages? And then conversely, does it make sense to have like a link in your bio? Because I usually set these up for my clients where I have a special page that's actually on their website and not like link in bio or whatever,
Hmm.
where it's very specific for that specific social media platform. So it would be, like the website slash Instagram, and that would be the landing page. And then you can have your disclaimers on there. Wouldn't that theoretically be safer and better?
It depends on the individual website. Like
Okay.
every website, as you know, as a web designer, has kind of a flow that a user is going to use, right? We don't want things to seem like they're buried, but we also don't want things to drive people away from your website or seem super intimidating when they come up, right? So depending on the structure of how your blog is readable, having your little disclaimer over to the side might be better for you than having like a link at the bottom to a full page. I would probably argue with you that having the disclaimer on the side and then also having a link at the bottom where a person can go for more detail, let's see that, is probably going to be like for someone who's reading from top to bottom, the best way to make sure that they're getting that content. Ultimately, whoever's judging you on this, whether it's a platform host or you're involved in some kind of lawsuit, whatever it is, they're judging you based on how easy is it for me as a reader to one, know that I need to read this, and two, actually access what it is that I need to read. And so, based on how you're designing your website, you're going to make decisions with those two criteria in mind for the way each individual website looks. Also, you mentioned like disclaimers on social media platforms that are like specific to that platform, right? I usually have my clients consider one of two strategies. First is to have a link to their disclaimer somewhere that's easily accessible. But then I also ask them, would you be willing to consider making a brief disclaimer either in your bio or as a pinned comment on every post or at the end of every caption that just says one or two most important things that you want people to know? For, say, a dispensary, that's probably like nothing for sale, must be 21 to follow, right? For someone who's offering content that's harm reduction based, it may be something like, we don't encourage illegal activity. Look up the laws where you live before engaging with any substance. Whatever it is that's the most important thing to you, I often encourage people to just say it. If it's that important, if it matters that much, getting into the habit of pinning that comment to the top of everything is later on when that account gets lost and I need to go back and get it. One of the best things that I can point to, I can go to every screenshot and be like, look at this. See, they made sure people knew.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
I'll say thank you so much. That really helped me on a lot of areas, and hopefully other people here too.
Absolutely. And us for our website too. Psychedelic-revelations.com if you're wanting to find us. Okay, moving on. Allison says, I absolutely agree that choosing the 18-year-old minimum age restriction is strategic, but could it possibly be used against you to demonstrate you knew the content was potentially risky?
Sure, absolutely. Of course it could be. However, when one looks at the community standards and how they're actually written, talking about controversial things is allowed on Instagram. What's not allowed is pushing that content out to people who are underage. And so you are far more likely to lose an account that is not age restricted that talks about controversial things than one that is age restricted and talks about controversial things. Both risks exist at the same time, but one is far riskier than others. And it comes back to that principle I was talking about a little bit earlier, where don't stress yourself out about being perfect because you can't be. There's always going to be something that someone can point to and says, this is why we took your account down. This is the problem. This is the reason. However, we as business owners and as professional women are always making decisions about what's riskier versus what's the potential reward. And age restricting your account has the potential reward of keeping your account up for much longer and dealing with much less suspensions than not age restricting your account does.
Excellent. Good, great question. And thank you for your answer, Victoria. Next one. I host psychedelic integration circles and we do post on Facebook. How risky is this for my personal Facebook account and how can I mitigate the risk?
Interesting. I really like this question because it's the most common question I get, like how risky is my personal content? Um, to start with, it depends on the actual content. To give you a full answer to this question, I would need to sit down and review what it is that you're posting, how you talk about integration, how it is that you like advertise for people to find you, all of these things. However, um, when you're talking about your risk for your personal Facebook account and how you can mitigate that risk, talking about psychedelics in general on Facebook is risky for your personal account. Because of the fact that Facebook will tend to flag anything that talks about psychedelics over time, and Facebook is kind of where all of the linking of the accounts is hosted. Like when you go to your Meta page, it starts with your Facebook and then everything is linked from there. Posting on Facebook to an account that is linked to your personal account is probably one of the more risky ways of losing your personal account. So if I was going to mitigate that risk today, here's what I would do. First, I would go change the email and phone number associated with my personal account to something that is associated with nothing else. I would then log out of my personal account on any device that I used my business account on and make sure that if I were going to access my personal account, I would have to log back in manually. Once I separated those two things, I would go to my personal account and make sure that people could not tag me or co-post with me without my approval, so that if I accidentally left anything logged in, something I posted on my integration page wouldn't accidentally end up on my personal page. Then, depending on how much I was investing in my social media presence, like if this was all of my income, for example, I might even consider like a burner device, like a burner phone that's just for logging into my business stuff so that that accident would never happen. Obviously, that's a more extreme tactic, but for my people that are spending $500,000 on Meta ads every year, those people, that burner device that you pay $100 a month for is probably worth it. For the average person, it's probably not. But it is the more extreme option when your business grows and when you get all of the success that you've ever dreamed of, that's a way that you can protect it. The other things I would do if I were in Sarah's position is I would make sure that whenever I got done posting on my business account about my psychedelic integration circles, that I logged out. And that way I was sure that every time I was going to that account, I was intentionally going to it.
Oof, that is a lot of great practical advice. Again, this is so, so valuable what you're sharing with us today, Victoria. Thank you so much. Wendy's got her hand up over there.
Can I have a question that piggybacks on that? So I kind of have done that by using Google Chrome profiles. So like I have different emails with Google Chrome profiles and I have my different Facebook accounts and different Instagram accounts. So that way, at least on my computer, it just makes it easier so I can check my because my personal Facebook and my personal Instagram are not logged in anywhere because I don't want to lose those images.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose anything, so I don't have anything attached to that. So I just wanted to like that is a I found that to be a way that makes it easier. You just have your personal Chrome profile. But there shouldn't be any reason why that would be connected, right? At that point.
There shouldn't be. However, depending on what operating system you're running on your computer, there is some crossover sometimes. And so I always tell people if you want to be ultra, ultra safe, if you want to like go to the nerd levels that I have, and I'm somebody that like lives with a cybersecurity attorney. So we're constantly experimenting with different cybersecurity protocols. You can actually create different users on your computer for different accounts. And so when you log into your computer itself, when you access your profile on your computer itself, you can have different profiles associated with your different social media and only use that profile on that specific social media and vice versa so that they never, ever, ever overlap. For most people, that's probably overkill. But if you're, say, a social media manager who has a ton of clients that are really concerned about losing their account, that extra step might be worth it to you. A lot of people will also do this where just their personal accounts have that separate profile, and then anything else that they work on, work accounts, clients, or whatever is on a separate profile, just to protect their personal assets from anything that might happen with work. Because it all really does depend on the operating system. And as updates to operating systems come out, this advice can change. So having the separate profiles and having, separate users on your computer for every social media that you're accessing is the most separate way that you're going to be able to do this with a singular device.
Can I do one more since you're cyber thing? So if I had, say, like a tablet that's only at home and I just use that one, and as long as it's not this and it's a different thing that should be protected, or does the fact that it's coming from the same IP make a difference either?
Depends on the platform.
Okay.
Sometimes using the same IP address or the same Wi-Fi will cause some people some problems because of those account integrity standards that are looking for, like, are you close to things that are trying to get around Meta standards? You're operating as safely as you can based on the resources that you have. And I think that that's incredibly important, but there's always more that all of us could be doing. And so when you say like I have a separate tablet, well, you could mask your IP address. You could use a VPN. Do you really need to? Probably not. But if it matters to you and it's your income, you might want to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is so valuable. I guarantee and I bet a lot of people here today are going to be listening to the replay and like frantically taking notes and being like, okay, I really like what you say though, Victoria, is like do the best that you can, not try to be perfect. Don't stress out about it. And there's going to be an element that is completely out of your control, regardless of what you do. So these are practical things you can do. You check in with yourself as far as your risk profile, what you want to and willing or to do, and then let it go.
Yeah. You had to be brave to get here. Like talking about this stuff in public involves a level of bravery that you've already taken on. You get to decide how much more brave you want to be or what precautions you want to take, but you were already brave to get here, and brave people deal with problems sometimes as a result of being willing to be out in front.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. So Joanna was asking us, or Jonna was asking us, how does this conversation apply to LinkedIn? Should we be following the same basic guidelines, or are there any differences to call out?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn because everything's easier on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's content standards are written with the assumption that everyone on LinkedIn is an adult. So you can have much more controversial conversations with less censoring on LinkedIn. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't get censored. Like I've had posts get taken down all the time when I'm talking about work. Literally, I remember one of them was like emergency hemp regulations that were released in my state of Louisiana where I used to live. That kind of content will sometimes get flagged, but it's pretty rare. However, Joanna said, or Jonna said, any differences to call out, and there is one that I want to call out. LinkedIn started training generative AI for Microsoft on your data on November 4th of this year, I believe it was. It might have been November 3rd. You can actually turn that off in your settings. So when you go to your LinkedIn settings, you will see a little area where it says data, and you can click on that, and then there's a little slider that allows you to turn off the use of generative AI training from your data. It's one of the few platforms that allows you to do that. And so I always encourage people to take advantage of that. The fact that LinkedIn allows you to not feed the bots for them is incredibly important to not only your privacy, but to the future of our economy as AI becomes more and more of a time, energy, and data suck from the environment. We do not want to give things away to multi-billion dollar companies for free. We've already seen what has happened when AI has been trained on trademarked content to mimic people's writing styles and really hurt the community of artists and musicians that depend on their creativity to live. So, establishing that norm that we're not going to allow you to have this for free is really important to supporting our fellow person.
Good to know. Again, when I get off this call, I'm going and making some changes. This is a really good question that, again, Jonna asked, as we move forward and make some of these changes, do we need to go back and delete old content that might be risky?
Oh, I love this question. Because everybody's like, oh my gosh, I just realized that I had this content that was problematic. Sometimes people will go back and edit their content and like add a disclaimer or something like that, change a phrase. And that editing will cause the AI to rescan the content, and then their account will get taken down. So there's a risk here both ways. If you're going back and editing your profile to remove things, you're probably okay. But if you're going back and editing your profile to remove words or edit captions or things like that, there's a real chance that it's going to rescan the content because they're going to see it as newly edited content and that it's going to get your account taken down. So, to answer your question very specifically, there's a risk both ways. Leaving it up, we have seen accounts get taken down because AI rescanned old content, maybe because someone looked at it or pulled it up out in the great wide world and it got spotted. And so because somebody interacted with it or saw it or whatever it was, or it got served in a random algorithm, it gets rescanned and it gets taken down. We have also seen people go in and try to clean up their content and get taken down. So I would only edit my profile if I were editing it to remove something completely. And even then, I would be aware that interacting with old content can cause a problem. So there's a risk both ways. There's a risk with leaving it up. There's a risk with taking it down. And based on what we're seeing with the tools right now, those risks are about equal. So definitely don't go in and try to clean up content by changing captions or things like that. You're going to draw attention to it that can cause problems. Consider making other changes first, like adding disclaimers and improving the general security of your profile. And then decide, do I feel more comfortable leaving this up and later making the argument that you left it up for years, obviously it was fine? Or do I feel more comfortable removing this stuff and knowing that I might get suspended once, but that I don't have to worry about that anymore? There's not really a perfect answer to that question.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I think we covered all the questions in the chat. I'm just going to open it up to see if anybody feels like coming off mute and asking any questions into the space. We'll just make some room for that. Okay. I have another question that's kind of more of a macro question. More of a discussion than a question, I guess. It's just around, what, I guess, is there a role that some big influencers, for example, big pharma, or others that might be threatened by discussions around psychedelics, or people on one far extreme who are just stuck in the stigma of psychedelics? Is their influence being felt through these tighter restrictions?
Yes and no. One thing that I have seen is people purchase bots to mass report people that they believed were their competition or that they believed were, what's a good word for it? That they believed were somehow harming them. And so it was okay for them to create harm back. I've seen former business partners do that to people that they no longer worked with. And, sometimes that's effective and sometimes it isn't. It depends on how the threat is structured and whether or not Meta can catch it. One of the reasons that account integrity standards were added was to prevent people from doing things like purchasing bots to mass report. And so now, arguably, we actually have a better standard for being able to address that stuff once we can ferret it out. But finding it and proving that that's actually what happened is incredibly difficult to do. And it takes people with time, money, and resources to be able to point out that kind of conduct and actually fight it. Few people actually realize that they can call a lawyer and try to get their account back. The fact that that is so new, that people are just now finding out that their attorney might be able to do that for them, goes to show just how far we have to go in addressing some of the more sophisticated threats that happen on social media. So while most of this stuff is a result of inefficiencies and trying to be extra safe because of the presence of children on the platform and the fact that children's parents are finding class action lawyers who want to take on these lawsuits and suing and winning, that is the majority of the issue here. That the risk of a lawsuit is much higher than the financial risk posed by accidentally deleting something that's allowed to be there. That's
Mm.
where the majority of this comes from. But there absolutely are bad actors out there that will spend $100 and purchase 10,000 bots to report your account because they think that you're their competition. There are absolutely abusive people out there that have gone after their exes, their former business partners, the people who just made them angry for some reason, um, and lost them business accounts and engaged in financial abuse via social media manipulation. It is hard to challenge those things because it takes money and time. But ultimately, the thing that gives me some optimism about this is that the reasoning behind a lot of the new stricter policies is to give Meta and other platforms a mechanism to address these bad actors that they didn't have before. And so I do think there is an effort in big tech in general, but in social media platforms especially, to not allow abuse on the platforms.
Okay. Thank you for that insight. That's valuable. Victoria, this conversation has been disturbing in some ways. I know that's not what you were expecting to hear. But yeah, just disturbing to know to really face the risks, like uncomfortable to face the risks. It's been so informative and so helpful around not only like what we can do, but also, one thing I've really appreciated about in all of our correspondence, everything that we've talked about as you worked with me on my case as well, is this beautiful balance between, I guess, like kind of like science and soul. And so like giving us the goods, but also remembering, like talking to us like we're people with limited bandwidths, and we giving us that comfort that if we know the risks, then we can do what is in our control to the extent that we are willing to, and that then we can let go from there. It's just been really an incredibly powerful and informative and valuable conversation. And I really, really appreciate it. Before we wrap up for today, I also just wanted to hand the mic back to you just to see if there's anything in particular that we missed or anything that, you're burning to bring into this space, or any last wise words you might like to leave us with.
I'd like to leave you with three things. First of all, what you're doing is important and you're not shallow for being concerned about your social media. When I got hurt and I was looking for alternative pain relief and somebody suggested psychedelics to me, I was not part of super secret WhatsApp groups where I could ask people honest questions. I didn't know anyone who'd ever used a psychedelic before. If it weren't for people like you who are willing to take the risk of talking on major platforms, I never would have found the pain relief that I needed or the resources I needed to feel comfortable even trying it. This is important, and there is a reason why people like me are willing to fight for it. Second thing I'll leave you with is you cannot be perfect and you have less control than you think that you do. It is okay for you to go, this is really frustrating, but I'm just going to build dealing with this into the way that I do business and move on from there. This is not something you should stay up rolling around in bed about. Do not give these billionaires that much of your time, attention, and peace. You are someone who is doing important work, and this is just a part of the reality of dealing with it, and you're more than capable of dealing with that. The last thing I'll leave you with is this. None of this, the social media, the cybersecurity, none of it is more important than your wellness is. So if you find yourself getting stressed and worrying about all of this stuff too much and like, oh my God, I've made a mistake every time you post, something like that, take a minute and breathe and separate yourself from this reality. These people have made billions of dollars by siphoning away our attention. And ultimately, your attention, your peace, your heart, your soul are far more important than any money that you can make them. So if you need to take a break, take it. Your business and you will be better for it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Victoria, for people who might like to have a more in-depth conversation with you or engage with you, what is the best way for them to find you and to communicate with you?
Now, there are 4 easy ways to find me. The first is to email me at vsatanovich@rudicklawgroup.com. There's also a contact form on rudicklawgroup.com where you can get in touch with me. I am Victoria Satanovich on LinkedIn, where you will find me talking about this every single day. And you can also find me at Victoria_verified on Instagram.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I realize I butchered your last name when I introduced you at the beginning. I should have asked you first, but thanks once again for being here with us. Thank you, everyone who's here in our live audience. Thank you to our listeners and our viewers that are watching after the fact. Encourage you to travel over to psychedelic-revelations.com to find out what we have upcoming and to listen to all our hundreds of past episodes that we have up there. And next week, just a FYI, we do have Linda Samphire coming back to speak with us once again about the beautiful, beautiful sacred plant, Amanita muscaria. So if you'd like to learn more about that, come and join us then. And Wendy, I'm going to pass it over to you before we head off for today, see what else might be on your mind, and ask you to take us out of the show today.
Yeah, I wanted to say two things. Number one, on the episode that for those of us who are here right now, that page where you did the form, you can see Victoria's contact information. So her website, her LinkedIn, it's all there. And then also in our community, if you want to keep the discussion going, I do encourage you to go over to our online community and post any of the questions and stuff in there because it is off of social media, but it's our own private community space that we control the community guidelines for. So open conversation is there and available to you. So I wanted to say that before we signed off.
Yes, thank you. Just before you go, thank you for bringing that up. We will have ongoing conversations on this topic in our community, and it's a free community. It's just become a member by going to psychedelic-revelations.com, and we have post-episode discussions on every episode that we're posting, and you can also request topics or speakers that you might like to have here on Psychedelic Revelations. So thank you for that, and back to you, Wendy.
All right. So now everyone who is in the audience, I invite you to follow along. If you're wanting to, you can unmic right now, even if you don't come off video. And let's all take a big deep breath in together. And now let's sigh or growl it out.
Ah. And with the love and community of the Flourish Academy behind you, may you all go off and flourish. See you next week.